The day my daughter stopped calling me Mom and started calling me Vivian, I told myself she was just going through a phase. She was 34 years old. I remember the exact moment it happened. It was a Sunday afternoon in November, one of those gray Baltimore days where the sky can't decide whether to rain or just sit there and threaten you. I had called Simone 3 times that morning, once to ask about Tyler's ear infection, once to remind her about the sweet potato pie recipe she had asked for 2 weeks ago and never followed up on, and once just to hear her voice, though I would never have admitted that out loud. She finally picked up on the 4th call. Vivian? Not Mom, not even a hello first. Just my name, flat and tired, like she was reading it off a piece of paper. I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you back? She did not call back. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that, holding the phone with both hands the way you hold something when you're not sure whether to put it down or throw it. The kitchen was quiet the way houses get quiet when children have grown and left and taken all their noise with them. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove ticked. Outside, a car rolled slowly past on the wet street. I told myself, she's busy. She's 34, and she has a 7-year-old son and a demanding job and a whole life that I am not the center of anymore. That's how it's supposed to be. That's what you raise them for. I told myself that. And I believed it, mostly because the alternative was something I wasn't ready to look at. My name is Vivian May Patterson. I am 63 years old. I was born and raised right here in Baltimore, Maryland, the only child of Dorothy and Robert Williams, in a row house on Edmondson Avenue that smelled like pine cleaner and Sunday pot roast, and the specific kind of silence that settles into a home where feelings are not discussed, only managed. I have spent my whole life believing I was different from my mother. I worked 2 jobs for 11 years to keep the lights on after my husband Elijah left. I attended every school play, every recital, every parent-teacher conference. I said I love you, out loud, regularly, something Dorothy never once said to me in the 61 years she was alive. I told Simone she was smart, that she was capable, that she could do anything she put her mind to. I said all the right words. And yet, 3 years ago, my then 3-year-old grandson Tyler looked up at me from the living room floor while I was rearranging the Lego pieces he'd just set down, and he asked me a question that I have not been able to unhear since. Grandma, why are you always fixing me? 3 years old, and he already felt it. I laughed it off that day. Children say things. They don't know what they mean. I kissed the top of his head and told him I wasn't fixing him. I was helping him. And there's a difference. But that night, lying in the dark, I heard the question again and again. And I started to wonder, if a 3-year-old could feel it, what had a 3-year-old's mother been feeling for 30 years? My mother never told me I was enough. I swore I would be different. Then one Christmas morning, my 3-year-old grandson asked me why I was always fixing him, and I realized I had become exactly what I promised I would never be. Just quieter about it. My mother, Dorothy May Williams, was born in 1932 in Selma, Alabama, the 4th of 8 children. Her father, my grandfather Hosea, worked farmland that wasn't his and came home at night with dirt under his fingernails and very little else. Her mother, my grandmother Ruth, took in washing and ironing for 3 white families on the other side of town, leaving the house before the children were awake and returning after dark. Dorothy learned early that love was something you demonstrated through endurance, not expression. You did not say I love you. You made sure there was food on the table. You made sure the children's clothes were clean. You kept going when you had every reason to stop. That was love. The words were decorative, and Dorothy had no patience for decoration. In the summer of 1950, when Dorothy was 18, her eldest brother James was arrested and beaten by 2 white men for the crime of making eye contact on a public sidewalk. James survived. He walked with a limp for the rest of his life and spoke in shorter sentences after that, as if the beating had taken something from his words as well as his body. Dorothy did not cry when she saw James come home, not in front of anyone. She sat beside him and cleaned his wounds with steady hands and a face that showed nothing. Later, she told me once, only once near the end of her life, that she had gone to the outhouse behind the farmhouse that night and cried until she couldn't breathe. Then she washed her face and went back inside. "You cry where nobody can use it against you," she said. She was not offering it as advice. She was offering it as fact, the way you state that water is wet or that winter is cold. This was simply how the world worked. Dorothy married my father, Robert, in 1952. They moved north to Baltimore in 1955, part of the long tide of black families moving away from the South and towards something that looked, from a distance, like possibility. Robert found work at a steel plant in Sparrows Point. Dorothy cleaned houses during the week and did alterations on the weekends. She had 2 miscarriages before she had me, in 1961. She never spoke about those losses. I only know they happened because I found the hospital records in a shoebox after she died. Dorothy loved me. I believe that completely, and I believed it even in the years when it was hard to feel. But Dorothy's love had a specific shape. It was practical, vigilant, and entirely focused on what I could become rather than what I already was. When I was 5 years old, I brought home a finger painting from kindergarten. My teacher, Mrs. Holloway, had written "Beautiful work, Vivian," in red marker at the top. I carried that paper like it was a trophy. I ran into the kitchen and held it up for my mother. Dorothy looked at it for a moment. Then she pointed to the left corner, where the blue paint had bled outside the lines I'd drawn. "Next time," she said, "stay inside the lines." She turned back to the stove. I folded the painting in half and carried it to my room. I put it at the bottom of my toy box, under the wooden blocks and the cloth doll with the missing eye. I did not throw it away. I was not entirely sure why, but I couldn't quite do that. But I never brought it back out. I did not bring another painting home after that. Not because I stopped painting in class, but because I stopped thinking anyone needed to see it. I grew up trying to be excellent, because excellence was the only language I knew how to speak to my mother. Straight A's were expected, not celebrated. A B+ was a question. What happened? Staying out of trouble was the baseline, not the accomplishment. I learned to be self-sufficient before I learned to be self-aware, and for a long time I confused those two things. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being raised by someone who loves you fiercely, but cannot show it in the ways you need. It doesn't look like anything from the outside. The lights are on. The refrigerator is full. You have clean clothes and someone who shows up when it matters. From the outside, it looks like a fine childhood. From the inside, it feels like being pressed up against a window, looking at warmth you can't quite get to. I carried that feeling for years without having a name for it. I met Elijah Patterson in 1982 at a church social in Park Heights. He was 24, long and easy in his movements, the kind of man who laughed with his whole body and made a room feel like it had more air in it. He asked me what I thought about something. I don't even remember what. Some news story or neighborhood thing. And then he actually listened to my answer. Not as a courtesy, with genuine interest. Like my opinion was information he wanted to have. I had not experienced that before. I married him 2 years later. Elijah was warm in all the ways my mother was not, and I loved him for it the way you love water when you've been thirsty for a long time. He hugged me from behind when I was standing at the stove. He left notes in my coat pockets. He said I love you easily, frequently, without apparent effort, the way some people say good morning or drive safe. Simone was born in June of 1986. She came into the world loud and hungry and completely certain of her own importance, and I thought, this is it. This is the thing I've been waiting for. I made a promise to myself the night I brought her home from the hospital. I sat in the rocking chair in her room at 2 a.m. while she slept against my chest, and I listed everything Dorothy had never done and everything I was going to do instead. I would say the words. I would celebrate the small things. I would let her know, regularly and specifically, that she was enough. I meant every word of that promise, and I kept most of it. I said I love you. I came to every recital. I drove to Philadelphia in the middle of the night when she called me crying once in her 2nd year of college. But here is the thing about promises made in the dark to a sleeping infant. They are made by the person you want to be, not always the person you are. And the person I was had been shaped, in ways I could not yet see, by 40 years of learning to love through correction. I would watch Simone draw at the kitchen table and feel this pull in my chest, something that was equal parts tenderness and anxiety. and before I knew what I was doing, I would be leaning over her shoulder, pointing out what she could improve. I would go to her recitals and sit in the audience with my heart so full it almost hurt. And on the drive home, I would find myself analyzing the third movement, the posture, the breath control, the slight hesitation before the bridge. I thought I was teaching her. I thought that's what mothers did. They saw your potential, and they pointed you toward it. I thought I love you, and here's how you could be better was the same as just I love you. I was wrong, but I didn't know I was wrong yet. Elijah left in 1995. Simone was 9 years old. He didn't leave because he found someone else. He left because, as he explained it to me in the kitchen one January evening while Simone slept upstairs, he had run out of room. "You love so hard it leaves bruises, Vivian," he said. "I don't have any room left that isn't organized by you." I didn't understand that sentence. I turned it over for years like a stone, looking at it from different angles, trying to find the place where it made sense. He was saying I loved too much. How was that possible? How was loving too much a reason to leave? I raised Simone alone after that. I worked as a bookkeeper for a construction company during the day and tutored math 3 evenings a week. I did not complain. I did not cry in front of Simone. I kept the lights on and the refrigerator full and made sure she had new shoes at the start of every school year. I became my mother. I didn't see it. Not for a very long time. Simone grew up excellent. By every external measure, she became exactly what I had worked and pushed and stayed up late and driven through sleet to help her become. She graduated valedictorian from her high school class. She received a full scholarship to Johns Hopkins University. She earned her master's degree in public health from the University of Pennsylvania. At 38, she is the director of community programs at a nonprofit in Philadelphia, doing work that genuinely matters, that changes the conditions of real people's lives. She is, by any reasonable account, a success. But here is what I have only recently begun to understand about the word success. It tells you where a person ended up. It tells you almost nothing about what they had to leave behind to get there, or what they learned to stop hoping for along the way. Simone stopped bringing friends home when she was about 12. I noticed, but I explained it to myself. She was a teenager. Teenagers wanted privacy. Teenagers were embarrassed by their parents. That was normal. What I did not know, what I did not let myself wonder about, was that Simone stopped bringing friends home because she was tired of watching their faces when I corrected things. The way her friend Destiny held her fork. The way her friend Jasmine spoke too loudly. Small things. Things I said quietly, almost kindly. But Simone watched her friends go still when I said them, and she felt the thing she had been feeling her whole life. That particular held-breath discomfort of being near someone who is always watching for what needs to be fixed. And she decided she did not want her friends to have to feel that. Simone stopped telling me about her dreams around the same time. When she was 15, she told me she wanted to study music, not as a hobby, as a real thing. She had been playing violin for 6 years by then, and her teacher, Mr. Dawson, had told her she had genuine talent, the kind that warranted serious consideration. I said, "Simone, that's not a career. That's a hobby. You're too smart to build a life on something that fragile." I meant it kindly. I meant it practically. I had watched too many people I grew up with chase beautiful and practical things and end up with nothing to show for the years they spent chasing. But what Simone heard, what she has carried for 23 years, was this: the thing you love most is not worth taking seriously. She put down the violin. Not immediately. She played for another year, but something had gone out of it. By 17, she had redirected all that discipline and precision toward academic achievement, which I praised without reservation, which I celebrated loudly and often. She became excellent at the things I approved of. She learned to want what I wanted for her. And she learned, somewhere deep and unspoken, that the real Simone, the one who loved music, who dreamed sideways and took up too much space and laughed too loudly when something was genuinely funny, that Simone was better kept private, safer that way. I did not know any of this at the time. I knew that Simone was accomplished and self-sufficient and somewhat reserved with me, but I attributed that to personality, to busyness, to the natural distance that comes when a child makes a life for herself far from home. I did not know that the distance had a specific cause. I did not know that the distance had a name. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October, and Beverly Hutchins, my best friend for 31 years, the woman who has seen me through Dorothy's death and Elijah's leaving and every hard thing in between, was sitting across from me at my kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. I had been talking for 45 minutes. I was explaining, for perhaps the 100th time, that I did not understand why Simone was so distant, that I had given everything, that I had worked and sacrificed and shown up, that I said I love you, that I came to the recitals, that I had been, by any fair measure, a good mother. Beverly listened to all of it. She let me finish. Then she set her mug down on the table, very carefully, and looked at me with an expression I had not seen on her face before. Not pity exactly, and not judgment, but something that sat precisely between them. The look of someone who has been waiting a long time to say something they were not sure you were ready to hear. "Vivian," she said, "baby, you just described Dorothy. Word for word. Do you hear yourself?" The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove ticked. I opened my mouth to tell her that was not fair, that I was nothing like Dorothy, that I said I love you and Dorothy never had, that I showed up and Dorothy had only ever worked, that there was an enormous difference between the two of us that Beverly was failing to account for. I opened my mouth to say all of that, and then, for reasons I still cannot fully explain, I closed it again. Because something in Beverly's voice, not her words, but the quiet steadiness underneath them, the way she said it like she was not trying to wound me, but trying to finally hand me something I had been missing. Something in that voice reached past my defenses and landed somewhere soft. I thought about the painting I brought home when I was 5 years old. I thought about the way Dorothy had pointed to the corner where the blue had bled outside the lines. I thought about the last time Simone had been in this kitchen, 18 months ago, standing at the counter slicing apples for Tyler. I had come in and said quietly and helpfully, "You'll want to hold the knife differently, like this. You're going to nick yourself." Simone had put the knife down. She had not been angry. She hadn't said a word. She had simply put the knife down, and something in her face had gone briefly, almost imperceptibly, somewhere else. The same place I used to go when Dorothy corrected me. "Vivian," Beverly said again, softer now, "I'm not saying you're a bad mother. I'm saying maybe the way you love has a shape that's hard to be inside of. And maybe Simone has been trying to tell you that for a long time, in the only way she knows how." I sat with that for a long time. The coffee in my cup went cold. Outside, a car moved slowly past on the wet street. I had spent 63 years believing I was different from my mother. For the first time, sitting in the quiet of my own kitchen, I began to wonder if I had been wrong. I did not sleep well that night. I lay in the dark of my bedroom, the same bedroom I had slept in for 27 years, in the same house on Keyworth Avenue that I bought with my own money the year after Elijah left. And I did something I had not done in a very long time. I stopped defending myself, even inside my own head, and I simply tried to remember. Not the version of events I had rehearsed over the years. Not the one where I was the woman who worked 2 jobs and kept the lights on and never missed a recital. The other version. The one I had been looking away from. I thought about Christmas of 2015. Simone had driven down from Philadelphia with Tyler, who was 6 months old and smelled like baby powder and new skin and something so sweet it made your chest ache. I had spent the entire week before their arrival cleaning the house, cooking, filling the refrigerator, setting up the portable crib in the guest room with the quilt my mother's mother had made. The one I had kept in a cedar chest for 40 years because it was too precious to use, and now seemed exactly right for a new life coming into the house. I had been so ready for them. Simone came through the door carrying Tyler in his car seat, and she looked tired in the way new mothers look tired, deeply and completely, like the tiredness lived inside her bones. But she was also glowing in a way that made her look like a younger version of herself, softer around the edges. The first thing I said to her was, "Why did you dress him in that color? It washes him out." Not "he is beautiful," not "I am so glad you're here," not "you look wonderful. Let me take that from you. Sit down, rest. Why did you dress him in that color?" Simone had laughed, a short sound, not quite a laugh, and said something about it being the only clean onesie she had left after the drive. I had gone to my linen closet and gotten a yellow one I had bought, just in case, because I knew better, because I had thought ahead, because that was what I did. I had thought I was being helpful. Lying in the dark, I tried to imagine what Simone had felt in that moment. Not what she had shown me, the short laugh, the easy deflection, but what had happened inside her, in the private place where she kept the things she did not say to me. I thought I knew, because I had felt it myself, standing at a kitchen counter in 1974, holding up a report card with 4 A's and 1 A-, watching my mother's eyes go immediately to the A-. The feeling is not quite anger. It is something quieter and more persistent than anger. It is the feeling of being looked at by someone who loves you, and knowing that the first thing their eyes do, automatically, without malice, is locate the thing that isn't right yet. It is exhausting to be loved that way. It is exhausting, and it is lonely, and after a while you learn to show that person only what can survive their attention. I lay there in the dark, and I went through the years like rooms in a house, opening doors I had kept closed. Simone's 30th birthday. I had organized the entire party, called her friends, rented the back room at her favorite restaurant in Philadelphia, drove up the day before to decorate, cooked a full spread of everything she had loved since childhood. I had been so proud of it. I had stood up to give a toast, and I had told the story, fondly I had thought, warmly, about the time Simone wanted to quit college in her second year because the pressure had become too much, and I had refused to let her. And look at her now. Look at her now. I had meant it as tribute. I had meant it to say, I believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. But I had told that story in front of 30 of her friends and colleagues. I had told it without asking Simone if she minded. I had taken one of her most vulnerable moments, a time when she had been genuinely struggling, genuinely close to breaking, and I had turned it into an illustration of my own good judgment. Beverly told me, months later, that she had found Simone in the restaurant bathroom crying. Not moved to tears crying. Trying to hold herself together crying. The kind that comes from something that has been pressed down for too long. Beverly hadn't told me at the time. She said she had stood there and held Simone and not said anything, because there was nothing to say that would have helped. And she hadn't told me afterward because, as she said very gently the next day in my kitchen, she hadn't thought I was ready to hear it. I was starting to understand what she had meant by that. Beverly came back this next morning. She let herself in with the spare key she'd had for 15 years and put a pot of coffee on without asking. And when I came downstairs in my robe, she was already sitting at the kitchen table with 2 mugs and an expression that told me she had something more to say. I need to tell you something, she said. And I need you to hear it without putting your armor on. I sat down. I wrapped my hands around the mug. I said, all right. Beverly had known Simone since Simone was 4 years old. She had watched her grow up in the particular way that a family friend watches a child, with enough distance to see things the parents can't, and enough love to make the seeing painful. She told me that Simone had come to her house about a year ago, on a Sunday evening in September, and had sat at Beverly's kitchen table the same way I was sitting now, and had talked for a long time. Simone was in therapy, had been for 2 years, with a woman named Dr. Renata Osei, a therapist in Philadelphia who specialized in what she called, Beverly said she was repeating the words as carefully as she could remember them, intergenerational relational patterns. Simone had not told me about the therapy. I had known she was going through something, had sensed a particular tiredness in her voice in the phone calls we still had occasionally, but she had not told me about Dr. Osei, and I had not pushed, and now I understood that not pushing had not been respectful of her privacy. It had been another way of not looking at something I was not ready to see. Beverly told me what Simone had said that September evening. She told it carefully, pausing occasionally as if checking the words for sharpness before she handed them to me. Dr. Osei had a name for the pattern. She called it conditional presence. Beverly said she had written it down on her phone afterward because she wanted to get it right. Not conditional love. Beverly was clear about that distinction, because Simone had been clear about it. Simone had never doubted that I loved her. The love was not in question. What was in question was the shape of my presence, the way I was most fully, most vitally, most warmly myself as a mother when there was something to address, something to improve, something to steer. When Simone was struggling, I arrived completely. I drove 3 hours in the dark. I cooked and sat beside her and said the warmest things I knew how to say. When Simone was fine, when things were simply good and ordinary and unremarkable, I became restless. I would look for the thing that needed attention. I would find it because there is always something if you are looking. And my finding it had the effect, unintentional, invisible to me, but consistent, of teaching Simone that being fine was not enough to hold my interest, that to have me fully, she needed to be in some kind of difficulty. She told Dr. Osei something, Beverly said, and she paused here, and I could see her deciding whether to say it. She said, "I think I learned that failing brought my mother closer, and I don't know how much of my life has been shaped by that." The kitchen was very quiet. I heard the words go in. I felt where they landed. I thought about Elijah. I thought about what he had said the night he left. "You love so hard it leaves bruises." I had spent years resenting that sentence, turning it into evidence of his failure to appreciate what I had given. But sitting here now, I began to understand that he had not been speaking about the quantity of my love. He had been speaking about its mechanics, the way my love was always accompanied by its own project plan, the way being loved by me meant being perpetually assessed. "There's one more thing," Beverly said. She looked at me steadily, and I looked back at her, and I thought, whatever this is, I am going to let it in. I am not going to put my armor on. "Simone doesn't keep Tyler away from you because she's busy," Beverly said. "She keeps Tyler away because she is trying to protect him." The word protect landed differently than I expected. I had braced myself for something. For anger, for blame, for the accumulated weight of everything I had done wrong over 30 years. I had prepared myself, in that way you prepare yourself for impact, to absorb the blow and stay upright. But I had not prepared myself for protect, because that word assumed an active threat. That word assumed that my grandson, who I loved with the whole unreserved force of everything I had, my Tyler, who I had bought gifts for and sung to over FaceTime and thought about every single day, that my presence in his life was something his mother felt she needed to shield him from. Beverly saw my face and did not soften it. "She watched him with you, Vivian. She watched his face when you corrected him, and she said she saw herself at 5 years old. That's not nothing. That's a mother doing exactly what she's supposed to do." I thought about Christmas 2019. Tyler at 3 on the living room floor, the Lego pieces I had rearranged while he wasn't looking, because the bridge he'd built was structurally unsound and was going to fall, and I wanted to save him the disappointment. "Grandma, why are you always fixing me?" I had laughed it off. I had kissed his head and told him there was a difference between fixing and helping. But there wasn't, was there? Not really. Not from the inside. From the inside, the feeling is the same. Someone who loves you reaches over and moves your pieces without being asked, because they have already decided they know better than you do where the pieces should go. And the message, unspoken, unintentional, absolutely consistent, is, what you built on your own isn't quite right. I put my face in my hands. I sat there for a long time. Beverly didn't say anything. She just refilled my coffee cup and stayed. That evening I called Simone. Beverly had texted her first. I had asked her to because I was afraid that if Simone saw my name on the screen, she would let it go to voicemail the way she had been doing for months, and I could not bear to lose my nerve and then have nowhere to put it. Beverly texted and said simply, "Your mama needs to talk to you. Please pick up." Simone picked up on the second ring. Her voice was careful, guarded in the specific way of someone who has been hurt enough times in a particular place to approach it differently now. Not closed, but cautious. She said hello and then nothing else, waiting. I had prepared what I was going to say. I had spent an hour at the kitchen table with a notepad trying to organize my thoughts the way I organized everything. Clearly, logically, with the important points in the correct order. But when I heard her voice, all of it went out of me. I said, "Simone, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly." She waited. "Have I been hurting you?" The silence that followed was the longest I have ever sat inside of. I counted my own heartbeats without meaning to. I looked at the magnolia tree outside the kitchen window, the one I had planted the year Elijah left because I had needed to do something with my hands, and I watched it stand absolutely still in the cold November air. Then Simone made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound of something that had been held in too long finally being allowed, briefly, to exist. A breath that broke in the middle. And then, after a moment, her voice. Quiet, careful, shaking only slightly at the edges. Yes, Mom, you have. I closed my eyes. And I don't know how to make you understand it without destroying you, so I've just been staying away instead. Because staying away felt kinder. There it was. 20 years of distance named in 2 sentences. I wanted to say, I didn't mean to. I wanted to say, I was trying to help you. I wanted to say, I worked so hard for you. I sacrificed so much. How can you? All of that rose up in me at once, that old familiar machinery, the whole apparatus of my own defense. And I let it go. I breathed out, slowly, and I let it go. Okay, I said. I hear you. Mom, I'm not going to explain it. I hear you, Simone. That's all I'm calling to say tonight. I hear you. Another silence. Different from the first one. Okay, Simone said at last. Her voice was different now. Not warm exactly, not yet, but something in it had opened slightly, like a window cracked an inch after a long winter. Okay, we said goodbye. The call lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after. Then I got up, put my coat on, and walked out into the cold Baltimore night. I walked for an hour, maybe more, through streets I had known for 40 years. Past the corner store and the barber shop and the church where I had said goodbye to my mother 3 years ago. Past the elementary school where Simone had learned to read. I walked until I got tired, and then I walked a little more. I was 63 years old, and I had just heard the truest thing anyone had ever said to me. I had been hurting my daughter. Not with cruelty, not with indifference, with love. With the specific and persistent application of a love that had never learned how to simply be present without also being useful. A love that had been handed down to me already shaped that way, already carrying that particular damage, the way a piece of furniture carries the marks of every house it has lived in. Dorothy had done it to me. I had done it to Simone. And Simone, with every resource she had, therapy, distance, the fierce, protected awareness of a mother watching her child's face, was trying with everything she had to make sure it stopped with her. The least I could do was help her. There is a difference between knowing something and understanding it, and the distance between those two things can sometimes be the work of a lifetime. I had known, in an abstract and self-protective way, that Simone and I were not close in the way I had imagined we would be when she was small. I had known that she called infrequently, visited rarely, shared very little of her actual life with me. I had attributed this to busyness, to the natural pulling away of adulthood, to the 3-hour drive between Baltimore and Philadelphia. After that phone call, I began to understand it differently. I went through the years again, but this time I was looking for a different kind of evidence. Not the things I had done wrong. I had already started to see those. I was looking for the pattern of what Simone had stopped sharing with me, and when, and why. She had stopped telling me about her friendships somewhere around age 12. I had thought, teenagers want privacy. What I had not seen was that she had stopped bringing friends home because she was protecting them from the sensation of being assessed. She had stopped telling me about her dreams at 15, the year I told her music wasn't a career. She had redirected all of that love and discipline into something I approved of, and she had done it so thoroughly that 20 years later, she was sitting in a therapist's office at 36, discovering that she didn't fully know what she actually wanted, because wanting things that I might dismiss had never felt safe. She had not told me about her decision to have Tyler on her own, outside of marriage. I had found out from Beverly, 6 months into the pregnancy, which meant Simone had been carrying that decision, and all the vulnerability and courage it required, without telling the one person who, in most families, would have been the first call. She had not told me when she started therapy. She had not told me when she got the promotion that represented 10 years of relentless work. She had told Beverly, and Beverly had told me, and I had called Simone to congratulate her, and she had said thank you, Mom, in a voice that was pleasant and distant and told me nothing. I had thought, she's private. Some people are just private, but privacy is something you choose. What Simone had was something else, a learned habit of self-protection, the result of years of bringing herself to me and receiving, instead of simple witness, an appraisal. She had stopped bringing herself because it was easier than watching me look for what needed work. Beverly came by again that Thursday. She brought cornbread from the bakery on Reisterstown Road, and she sat across from me and she told me the thing she had been protecting me from for years. "I need you to know something," she said. "The people who love you have been seeing this for a long time." She said it carefully, the way you lower something fragile onto a surface you're not sure will hold it. She told me about the women from our church, the ones who had known me for 30 years, who had watched Simone grow up in the fellowship hall, and the vacation Bible school, and the front pews every third Sunday. Sister Barbara Reeves, Sister Gloria Tate, Mrs. Lorraine Washington, who had taught Simone's Sunday school class for 6 years, and who had said to Beverly once, in the parking lot after service, watching me straighten Simone's collar for the 3rd time before the Christmas pageant, "That child is going to run the minute she's old enough, and it'll break Vivian's heart, and Vivian still won't understand why." Mrs. Washington had said that in 1997. Simone was 11 years old. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked. Beverly looked at me with that same expression from before, the one that lived between pity and love. "Because you weren't someone people felt they could tell hard things to, Vivian. You know that about yourself. You present as a woman who has everything handled. You present as someone who has already thought of everything and made all the correct decisions. It's not mean. It's just true. People don't walk up to that and say, 'Actually, I think you're getting this wrong.'" I thought about Dorothy, about how no one had ever said a hard thing to Dorothy either, about how I had inherited not just her way of loving, but her way of being in the world. The closed-off self-sufficiency, the "I'm fine" that shut conversation down before it started, the armor that I had believed was strength and that had been, all this time, also a wall. "The whole community saw it," Beverly said quietly, "and none of us knew how to tell you. I'm telling you now because I think if I don't, you're going to lose Simone. Not to anger. She's not angry, Vivian. She's just tired, and tired people stop trying eventually." I nodded. I did not trust my voice. "Simone is not distant because life got busy," Beverly said one more time, making sure I had it. "She built a life in Philadelphia because she needed enough space to figure out who she was without you in the room. That's not nothing. That's a whole daughter trying to survive the way she was loved." Outside, the November afternoon was going gray at the edges. The magnolia tree stood bare against the sky. I had built a life around being strong, around being the woman who held things together, around never needing, never faltering, never asking for something I wasn't sure I'd receive. I had built it out of the same materials Dorothy had built hers from, and it had cost us both, in different ways, the same thing. I decided to write Simone a letter, not a text message, not an email. A letter written by hand on the good stationery I kept in the bottom drawer of my desk. Cream-colored paper with a small magnolia printed in the corner that I had bought years ago for thank you notes and never quite used up. I wanted Simone to hold something I had touched. I wanted her to know that I had sat down, deliberately, and put my hands to the work of reaching her. I started writing on a Friday evening in early December, at the kitchen table, with a cup of chamomile tea going cold beside me. I wrote for 3 hours. The letter, when I finished it, was 4 pages long. I read it back to myself slowly, moving my lips slightly the way I do when I'm reading something I want to be sure I'm understanding correctly. It began, "Simone, I have been doing a lot of thinking since we spoke, and I want you to know that I understand now, in ways I didn't before, the sacrifices you made to be in relationship with me. I worked 2 jobs to give you a better life than I had. I pushed you because I believed in your potential when sometimes you didn't believe in it yourself. I was critical because I knew the world would be harder on you than it was on others, and I wanted you to be ready. Everything I did out of love." I had been sitting with Beverly on Saturday morning when she asked to read it. Beverly read it slowly, both hands flat on the table, The way she reads things, she wants to be sure she understands. She turned the pages without speaking. When she finished, she set the letter down and was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Vivian, this is not an apology." I looked at her. "This is a case you're building," she said. "Every paragraph is an explanation for why what you did was reasonable. You're not apologizing to Simone. You're asking Simone to agree that you were justified." I started to respond, and Beverly held up one hand gently, the way you stop traffic. "Let me read you something first." She picked up her phone. She scrolled for a moment, and I watched her face as she found what she was looking for. Something in her expression shifted. A careful tenderness, the look of someone handling something old and fragile. "You sent me a message," Beverly said, "in January of 1995, the week after Elijah left. You were devastated and you were furious, and you called me at midnight and you read me a message Dorothy had sent you." I had forgotten about that message. I had forgotten that Dorothy had sent anything at all in those first raw weeks. I had been so submerged in my own pain that the outer world had barely registered. "I saved it," Beverly said. "I don't know exactly why. I felt like it was important to keep." She read it aloud. Dorothy's message, sent on a January evening in 1995, went like this: "I have worked every day of my life so you would not have to struggle the way I did. I gave you everything I had to give. I made sure you had more than I ever did. I do not understand why that was never enough for you. I hope someday you will look back and see what I sacrificed and understand that everything I did because I loved you." Beverly lowered her phone. The kitchen was absolutely silent. I looked at the letter I had written. I looked at the words Beverly had just read from her phone. I read my first paragraph again. "I worked 2 jobs to give you a better life than I had. I pushed you because I believed in your potential. I was critical because I knew the world would be harder on you. Everything I did out of love." Dorothy's words: "I have worked every day of my life so you would not have to struggle. I gave you everything I had. I do not understand why that was never enough for you. Everything I did because I loved you." They were not similar. They were the same, not in surface detail. The specifics were different. The circumstances were different. The generation was different. But the architecture was identical. The same foundation, the same load-bearing walls, the same conclusion that love justified everything and therefore required no examination. The same appeal to sacrifice as evidence of virtue. The same confusion between "I worked hard for you" and "I see you." I had read Dorothy's message 28 years ago and felt wounded by it. I had felt in the most private place inside me that my mother had completely missed the point, that she had confused the material provision of love with its emotional reality, that she had listed her sacrifices as though they were sufficient response to my pain. I had spent 28 years knowing, in the abstract, that Dorothy had gotten it wrong, and I had just written the same letter. Not because I was cruel, not because I was careless, but because this was the only grammar of love I had ever been given, and I had been speaking it so fluently, for so long, that I had not heard it as a dialect. I had heard it as plain language. The only language there was. I picked up the 4-page letter and I held it for a moment. Then I tore it in half, then in quarters. I set the pieces on the table. Beverly watched me do this without saying anything. "What do I say instead?" I asked her. My voice came out smaller than I expected. Beverly thought about this for a moment. "You say what you actually mean," she said. "Not what you've done or why you did it. What you actually feel right now, sitting here." I picked up a fresh sheet of the cream-colored stationery. I sat there for a long time. And then I wrote, "Simone, I have been listening, not to figure out what to say back, just listening. I would like to hear whatever you need to say, whenever you're ready. I won't try to explain. I won't try to fix it. I'll just be there." Mom, 4 sentences, less than 40 words, the hardest thing I had ever written. I put it in an envelope and addressed it by hand and walked to the post office that same afternoon, even though it was cold and the sidewalk was slick with the first thin frost of December. I wanted to carry it there myself. I wanted that walk to mean something. 7 days passed. I am not by nature a patient woman. I have moved through life with a calendar and a plan and a clear sense of what needs to happen when. Waiting without a timeline is one of the specific tortures designed for people like me. The not knowing, the absence of any lever to pull or step to take, the requirement to simply sit inside the uncertainty and trust that it will resolve. I waited. I did not call Simone. I did not text. I did not ask Beverly to check in on my behalf. I sat in my kitchen every morning and drank my coffee and watched the magnolia tree and let the waiting be what it was. On the 8th day, at 7:40 in the evening, my phone rang. Simone. I picked up before the second ring was finished. I got your letter, she said. Her voice was different from the last time we had spoken. Still careful. Simone had spent years being careful with me, and 4 sentences on cream-colored paper were not going to undo that overnight, nor should they. But underneath the carefulness there was something else. A quality I recognized, because I had heard it in my own voice once, the night I called Beverly from the parking lot of the hospital after Dorothy died and said, I don't know how to feel about any of this, and I need someone to just stay on the phone with me. It was the quality of someone who was very tired of carrying something alone. I need you to understand something before we go any further, Simone said. I'm not calling to hurt you. I am calling because I am tired. I am so tired of managing this distance between us and pretending it's just geography. I know, I said. I know you are. And I need you to not get defensive. Because the minute you get defensive, I close up. I've been closing up my whole life and I can't do it anymore. Dr. Osei says, she stopped. I've been seeing a therapist, she said a little differently, for 2 years. Beverly told me, I said. I'm glad. A pause. She had expected perhaps a different response to that. She's helped me figure out some things, Simone said, about patterns, about what gets passed down without anyone meaning to pass it down. I want to hear it, I said. All of it. Whatever you need to say. Another pause, longer this time. Okay, she said finally. Okay, then can you come to Philadelphia? Not to stay, just for the day. I want to do this in person. Tell me when, I said. 3 weeks, before Christmas. I'll be there. We were quiet for a moment. Not the difficult silence from before. Not the silence of 2 people behind separate walls. Something thinner than that. Something that felt cautiously like the beginning of a door. Mom? Yes. Thank you for the letter. I pressed my lips together. Thank you for calling back, I said. I drove to Philadelphia on a Saturday in the 3rd week of December. I left Baltimore at 7 in the morning, before it was fully light, because I needed the drive time to be alone with myself in the particular way that only a car on an empty highway allows. No tasks to accomplish, no one to present myself to, just the road and the dark sky going slowly gray, and my own thoughts settling into whatever arrangement they were going to take. I had told myself the night before that I was going to listen. That was the whole task. Not to explain, not to contextualize, not to offer the history of my own wounds as mitigation for the wounds I had passed along. Beverly had said it plainly. You're not going there to be understood. You're going there to understand. I had written that on a notepad and left it on my kitchen counter, so it would be the last thing I saw before I walked out the door. You are not going there to be understood. You are going there to understand. Simone's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a brick building in West Philadelphia, in a neighborhood full of old trees and narrow streets. I had only been there twice before, once when she moved in to help carry boxes, and once 2 years ago for Tyler's birthday party, which had felt stiff and effortful for reasons I now understood differently. She buzzed me up without ceremony. When she opened the door, we looked at each other for a moment across the threshold. She was wearing a gray sweatshirt, and her hair was loose, and she looked like herself in a way she did not always look when she was prepared for my visit. Less armored, more present. I had brought nothing. No food, no gifts, no container of something I had made at home that she hadn't asked for. I had driven 3 hours with empty hands, which for me was an act of genuine discipline. Beverly had told me, don't bring things. Things are how you make yourself necessary. Just bring yourself. So I had brought myself. Hi, Mom, Simone said. Hi, baby, I said. I said. We hugged briefly at the door, careful, like two people who are learning again how much pressure to apply. Then she stepped back and let me in. Tyler was at his sitter's for the day. Simone had arranged it deliberately. She had wanted this to be the two of us, without the softening distraction of a child's presence, without the option of retreating into grandmother and grandson when the conversation became difficult. We sat at her kitchen table. She had made coffee. The apartment was quiet and clean and smelled like the candles she always burned, cedar and something floral that I had given her 3 Christmases ago and that she apparently still used, which moved me in a small and private way. I want to tell you some things, she said, and I need you to not take notes. I looked at her. Not literal notes, she said. I mean, I need you to not be building your response while I talk. I need you to actually hear it. Okay, I said. Can you do that? I'm going to try, I said. That's the most honest answer I can give you. Something in her face shifted slightly, a small, reluctant acknowledgement, like she had expected me to simply say yes, and the honesty of I'm going to try had caught her off guard. Okay, she said. That's okay. She talked for a long time. She told me about the paintings she had stopped bringing home. She told me about the car rides home from recitals, how she had played her violin not for the music, not for the audience, but to survive the drive home, to give me as little to correct as possible. She told me about the birthday party, about standing in the restaurant bathroom while Beverly held her and trying to understand why the most loving toast her mother had ever given her had made her want to disappear. You told the story of the worst moment of my life like it was a testament to your judgment, she said. Like my breakdown was evidence of your good parenting, and everyone applauded. And I stood there and smiled and thought, she doesn't even know she did it. She told me about telling me she wanted to study music and what she had heard when I said that's not a career. I know you were trying to protect me, she said. I know you had practical reasons, but what I heard was, the thing that makes you most yourself is not worth building a life around. And I believed you. I was 15 and you were my mother, and I believed you. I spent 20 years building a life around the things you thought were worth building a life around. And the work I do is good, and I'm proud of it. I am. But there is a version of me that I will never know now, because I made myself smaller to fit what you could love. I kept my hands flat on the table. I kept my mouth closed. I did not say, but I only wanted what was best for you. I did not say I was trying to spare you from disappointment. I did not say, do you know how many women of my generation would have given anything for a mother who pushed them toward something? All of that was true. All of that was real. And none of it was what Simone needed from me today. She told me about Tyler, about the Lego pieces I had rearranged without being asked, about watching his face when I corrected him and seeing her own face at 5 years old looking up from a painting that had been found wanting. I love you, Mom, she said. I want you to know that. I am not here because I want to punish you or because I want you to feel bad. I'm here because Tyler is 7 years old and I want him to know his grandmother. And I want him to know you for longer than I was able to know you before I had to start protecting myself. Her voice broke slightly on that last sentence. She pressed her lips together and waited until it steadied. I want more time, she said. I just need it to be different. I sat with everything she had said. I sat with the paintings. I sat with the recitals. I sat with the birthday party and the violin and the Lego pieces and the 20 years of a daughter building a life out of the materials I had approved of rather than the ones she had loved. I sat with the image of Simone at 5 years old, putting a painting at the bottom of a toy box. I thought about myself at 5 years old, doing the same thing. I thought about Dorothy, standing at the stove, pointing to the place where the blue paint had bled outside the lines. I thought about Dorothy's mother, Ruth, washing clothes in the dark for other people's families, going out before her children woke and coming home after they slept, showing love the only way she knew how, which was to keep going, which was to make sure there was enough, which was to never let them see the cost. I thought about James coming home with his limp and his shorter sentences. I thought about the outhouse behind the farmhouse and Dorothy crying alone in the dark because that was the only safe place to do it. I thought about all of it. The whole long chain of women doing the best they knew how with the only tools they had been given, passing down their wounds wrapped in their love, generation after generation, each one meaning to do better and each one falling short in the same particular way. And I thought, it stops here. It stops with me. Or it stops with Simone. But it stops. I looked at my daughter across the kitchen table. She was watching me with that careful expression, waiting for the defense, waiting for the but, waiting for the long list of explanations she had been receiving her entire life in lieu of the simpler things she had always needed. I said, Simone? She looked at me. I said, you're right. She went very still. I said, and I'm sorry. The room was absolutely quiet. Simone waited. I could see her waiting. Her body had not quite relaxed. She was still braced, still expecting the but that had always come before. The but I was doing my best, or but you have to understand, or but I love you, and that should count for something. I had nothing to add. You're right. And I'm sorry. That was all there was. The silence stretched between us, and then something happened in Simone's face that I had never seen there before in 38 years of watching her face. The careful expression dissolved, not into weeping. Simone has always been in this way very much my daughter, but into something quieter and more complete. The particular relief of a person who has been carrying a weight for so long that they have forgotten what it feels like not to carry it, and who has just, for the first time, been allowed to set it down. She nodded once. Then she reached across the kitchen table and put her hand over mine. We sat like that for a long time, not talking, not explaining. Just two women at a table in the thin winter light, beginning, carefully and imperfectly, the work of finding their way back to each other. I started seeing a therapist in January. Her name was Dr. Patricia Ware. She had an office in a building on Charles Street in Baltimore, on the 4th floor, with a window that faced east and a rubber plant in the corner that had been alive so long it had grown nearly to the ceiling. She was a black woman in her late 60s, silver-haired, with reading glasses she wore on a beaded chain and a way of listening that made you feel the full weight of being heard. In our first session, she asked me to tell her about myself. I gave her the biography I always gave, the version with the achievements in it, the 2 jobs, the house I bought alone, the daughter I raised alone, the 35 years of keeping things together. When I finished, she looked at me for a moment. When was the last time someone asked you how you were feeling? She said. And you answered honestly? I thought about it for a long time. I don't think I ever have, I said. She nodded, as though this was not surprising and not a catastrophe, just information. Then that's where we start, she said. It was not a quick process. I want to be clear about that, because I think stories about healing sometimes suggest a transformation that arrives like weather, sudden, complete, unmistakable. That was not what happened. What happened was slower and less dramatic and more real. I was still, in March, catching myself reaching over to correct something Tyler had done before I had even registered the impulse. I was still, in April, composing explanations in my head during Simone's phone calls when what she needed was for me to simply stay quiet and receive what she was offering. Old habits do not dissolve because you have understood them. They dissolve, slowly and incompletely, because you have decided to keep noticing them even when the noticing is uncomfortable. But things were different. Simone began calling on Sunday afternoons again, not every Sunday, not reliably, but sometimes. The calls lasted longer than they used to. She told me once about a difficult week at work. She did not want my advice. She told me that clearly, gently. I'm not looking for solutions, Mom. I just want to tell someone about it. And I said, okay, I'm listening. And I listened. And when she finished, I said, that sounds really hard. And she said, yeah, it was. And then she asked about my week. That was a revolution. It did not look like one from the outside. But inside that phone call, something had shifted that had never moved before in all our years. In the second week of April, Simone invited me to Philadelphia for the weekend. She called it, with characteristic understatement, a visit. But I understood what it was. It was an experiment, a carefully considered offer of proximity, under conditions she controlled, to see whether the thing we had begun in December could survive ordinary time together. Tyler was home. He came running out of his bedroom when I arrived. in his pajamas with the dinosaur print, hair still mashed from sleep on one side, carrying a Lego tower he had apparently been up since 6 constructing. He launched himself at me with the specific violence of 7-year-olds in greeting, and I caught him and held him and felt the solidity of him, his small, warm weight, his absolute certainty that he was welcome. He pulled back after a moment and held the tower up for my inspection. "Look what I built, Grandma." I looked at the tower. It was ambitious. 14, maybe 15 stories, in a combination of red and blue and yellow bricks, asymmetrical, slightly top-heavy, with a small figurine standing on the uppermost platform that Tyler had apparently designated as the building's resident. I looked at it carefully. I saw on the 4th level a cluster of bricks arranged in a configuration that would compromise the tower's stability if he built much higher. The weight distribution was off. If he added 3 or 4 more stories, the whole structure would likely list to one side and come down. I felt the old impulse rise in me immediately, the reach, the instinct to intervene, to point out the problem and correct it before it became one, to save him the disappointment. I put my hands in my lap. I looked at Tyler's face instead of the tower. He was watching me with that open, total attentiveness that children have when they are waiting for a response to something they have made. No performance, no strategy. Just a 7-year-old boy who had built something and wanted someone he loved to see it. I said, "Tyler, that is the most magnificent tower I have ever seen." His face broke open into the specific joy of a child who has been seen completely, without condition, without qualification, without the shadow of, "And here's what you could do better." He let out a sound that was approximately a cheer and approximately a laugh, and then ran back to his room to get more bricks, shouting something about adding a helicopter landing pad. I sat there after he left, in the quiet of the living room, with my hands still in my lap. From the kitchen doorway, Simone was watching me. I looked at her. She looked back at me, and I saw something pass across her face, a complicated thing, layered and private, that I did not have complete access to and perhaps never would. But I recognized part of it. I recognized it because I had felt something like it myself, years ago, on a night when Elijah had reached for my hand in the dark for no particular reason, just because I was there, and I had understood for a moment what it meant to be loved without agenda. What passed across my daughter's face was not forgiveness exactly, or not only that. It was something quieter, the particular quality of relief that comes when you realize, after a long time of not being sure, that the thing you were afraid would keep happening might actually be stopping. She didn't say anything. She went back into the kitchen. I heard her moving around in there, the soft sounds of someone making tea, the ordinary domestic sounds of a Saturday morning. After a moment, Tyler came thundering back down the hallway with another fistful of bricks, and the apartment filled again with the cheerful chaos of a child building something. The cycle was stopping. Not finished. Cycles don't finish cleanly. They taper and ease and occasionally reassert themselves. And there would be days ahead when I would fall back into the old patterns and have to begin again. I knew that. Dr. Ware had told me that, and I believed her. But in that room, on that morning, with my grandson's voice filling the air and my daughter moving quietly in the kitchen, something had changed in the structure of things. The load-bearing wall that had held the damage in place for 3 generations had shifted, slightly but unmistakably, and light was coming through the crack. The next morning I woke before anyone else. That is my nature. It has always been my nature, the early rising, the preference for the hours before the world asks anything of you. I lay still for a few minutes, listening to the apartment breathe around me, and then I got up and went quietly to the kitchen and made coffee and carried it to the living room window. Philadelphia, in April. The trees on Simone's street had just begun to leaf out, that particular uncertain green of early spring, the green that looks almost accidental, like the trees surprised themselves. The street was empty, and the sky was the pale gray of early morning, and a single pigeon was walking the length of the windowsill across the way with great purposefulness, as though it had somewhere important to be. Tyler's Lego tower was on the coffee table. He had added 3 more stories before bed, and somehow it had not fallen. I sat with my coffee and looked at it. The 4th level cluster of bricks was still there, still off-center, still a structural risk. The tower was still, by any objective engineering standard, precarious. And it was still standing. I heard Tyler before I saw him. The soft slap of small feet on the hallway floor. The slight creak of a door. He appeared in the living room entrance in his dinosaur pajamas, hair destroyed by sleep, eyes still carrying the particular opacity of someone not quite fully awake. He looked at me. He looked at his tower. Then he looked back at me. "You didn't touch it," he said. Not an accusation. An observation, made with mild surprise, the way you might note unexpected weather. "No," I said. "I didn't." He considered this for a moment. Then he came and climbed up beside me on the couch, burrowing under my arm with the unself-conscious ease of a child who knows he is welcome. And we sat together in the early morning quiet and looked at his tower. "I'm going to add the helicopter pad today," he said. "I know," I said. "I can't wait to see it." He nodded, satisfied, and leaned his head against my side. We sat like that for a while. The street outside began to wake. A car, then another, then the distant sound of someone's door. The light coming through the window went from gray to the pale gold of a clear spring morning. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor's radio came on, a gospel station, low and warm, the sound moving through the walls like something remembered. I thought about Dorothy in the outhouse behind the farmhouse, crying in the only safe dark she could find. I thought about a 5-year-old girl carrying a painting to the bottom of a toy box. I thought about a 15-year-old putting down a violin she loved because the woman she loved most had told her, with the best intentions, that the thing she loved was not worth her life. I thought about 3 generations of women who had loved their children with everything they had, in the only shape they knew, and the damage that love had carried inside it, like a seed, dormant, patient, passing from hand to hand before anyone understood what they were holding. Tyler shifted beside me, reaching out toward the coffee table to make a small adjustment to one of the bricks on the tower's base. Not my adjustment. His. Something he saw that I had not seen. The tower steadied. I tightened my arm around him slightly, and he made a small, contented sound and leaned back, and we went on sitting together in the morning light, and I felt, for the first time in 63 years, in the deepest and most private place where the accounting of a life is kept, that I was not bracing for anything, not watching for what needed to be corrected, not preparing for what might go wrong, just here, just present, just enough. I did not learn to love differently because I became a different person. I learned because my daughter was brave enough to tell me the truth, and I was finally quiet enough, finally still enough, finally worn enough through with the weight of my own armor to hear it. Dorothy never got that chance. Not from anyone. Not from the world she lived in, which asked black women to be strong and asked them nothing else, and which had no language for the damage that kind of endless strength could carry inside it. I got the chance. Simone gave it to me, at great cost to herself, because she loved me enough to try one more time, and because she loved Tyler enough to make sure the thing that had been handed down through Dorothy and through me would not reach him. It won't. I know it won't because of the way he looked at his tower this morning and said, with the simple certainty of a child who has never been taught to doubt it, "I'm going to add the helicopter pad today." Not, "Is that okay?" Not, "What do you think I should do?" Not, "Will it be good enough?" Just, "I'm going to build the next thing. Just watch me." Dorothy never learned it. I almost didn't either. But Tyler is 7 years old, and he already knows his grandmother sees him. Not the version she wishes he were. Not the version she could make him into, but exactly, precisely, entirely who he already is. That is the only inheritance that matters. That is the only thing worth passing down.